Hi, and thank you for joining us tonight. This is the Weber County Republican Party virtual Meet the Candidate night tonight with our Weber County Recorder Surveyor candidates, James Coates and Leanne Kiltz. Again, this is the second in our series for our county delegates. We appreciate you taking the time to vet our candidates, to understand the issues, and to fulfill your duty despite the situation that we're currently in. Again, tonight we will follow the format of giving our candidates a few 3 minutes to introduce themselves and tell us whatever they'd like us to hear about themselves, their candidacy, what they'd like to accomplish in office. And then we'll go ahead and go straight to delegate questions from there. With that, we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Coates for the first introduction. Mr. Coates.
Thank you, Ryan. First of all, I'd like to thank the delegates for your time and your willingness to serve. Certainly in this interesting time in our country, in our state, and in our community, your willingness to continue to serve as delegates or to fill in for delegates who were elected 2 years ago by their caucus and unable to continue those duties this election cycle. I certainly appreciate your time. Ryan and Jake, I certainly appreciate your time as well in putting this together. I know it's interesting and out of the ordinary for us to do a meet the candidates through virtual means, and so hopefully the delegates are able to get something out of tonight's Meet the Candidates presentation. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is James Coates. I am a second-generation land surveyor. For those of you who have heard me talk, I'm very proud to be a second-generation land surveyor, the same profession that George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln got their start. A few years ago, I ran for county commissioner, and like Abraham Lincoln, I decided not to give up after failing that first time. I've spent my entire career surveying in the private sector, and I do believe that our local county government could use some private sector ingenuity and some private sector experience within the county government. And talking with my wife this election cycle, she was very supportive of me running for county surveyor and recorder, as she put it, sticking with something I knew well and sticking with something I did well. The Utah State Code does say that an elected surveyor should be a licensed surveyor whenever that position is held alone. In Weber County, it is a combined position with the recorder's office as well. And so that position is allowed to be filled by any individual. I personally think that a licensed land surveyor should be the elected surveyor when there is one available and willing to run. Beyond the fact that I am a licensed land surveyor and have spent my entire career surveying, I do believe that some of the private sector things that I could bring in are some of the things that I was hoping to bring in as the county commissioner. I do think that, especially with the possible economic downfall that's going to be or potentially going to be following this global pandemic, I think that we need to be tightening our belts as a county. I think that it would be great to look at some of the county budgets and try to roll those budgets back to our pre-2016 tax increase. I think that's very important, and that's what I'd like to bring to the table. Again, I think the Weber County Republican Party for putting this together, and I certainly appreciate the delegates' time. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And our incumbent recorder surveyor, Leanne Kiltz.
Hi, I'm Leanne, and I'd like to thank Jake and everyone that helped in this unique circumstance that we're under. And it's just overwhelming sometimes if I stop and think about it too much, but that's okay. We're going to get through this because we're Weber County and we can do this. I'm your current Weber County Recorder's Office. I'm also the president of the Utah Association of Recorders right now. I'm the past president for the Weber County Republican Women, and we have some awesome women out there in Weber County. As I promised when I took this office, I would bring equal representation to both the recorders and the surveyors. My chief deputy is a licensed surveyor, and I also have 2 other very competent licensed surveyors. So at any time, you can come into our office and talk to a licensed surveyor and be represented from that surveying side. Under my management, we've identified 2,000 monument locations. We've published 1,800 historical data on those locations. We have a right-of-way person who surveyed 13 miles of road in 15 different locations. When I took over the office, I went to the other county offices and asked them what was working and what wasn't working. And we decided that we were going to work on our turnaround for subdivision review. So we're proud to say that we're consistently kept a 2-week turnaround on those reviews. That also helps our planning commission and department, and along with the developers and the property owners. We're kind of proud of that. Our budget in 2015 when we took over was subsidized from the general fund. by the tune of $347,637. We met as department heads and we put our heads together how we could increase the revenue. In last year's budget, we showed a deposit to the general fund of $277,284, giving back to the other offices and not using any of the property's tax money. We're kind of proud of that. On the recorder side, we processed 66,694 documents last year. We maintain 107,111 parcels. That's the record owner, that's the address for the mailing, there's the address for 911. We build abstracts for property rights. Our mapping department did 185 new subdivisions. And most of all, we have a records manager who's preserving our records, which the state mandated. That's something, when I took over our ownership books, some of our oldest books, one of my prized possessions is an 1870 map of Ogden City. Other than that, I am proud to be a Weber County Republican, and I am proud to serve my office, and I would love to talk to you anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question tonight relates to what your take is on this entire government thing to begin with. It's a very common question that's come in from across the county, and that is first, the very simple, what is the proper role of government? And with that, we'll go ahead and start with Leanne.
The proper role of government. In the recorder's surveyor side, it is being able to maintain your records. As James suggested, George Washington and them were surveyors, and they did an excellent job. But it takes a recorder in that to keep track of the documents. So our part as being the government entity is being able to keep track of those records for forever. I mean, if you come into my office and you need some information, that's what we're proud of, that we have that available for you. And so that's our part in government, is your property rights.
Okay, and James, what is the proper role of government?
I believe the proper role of government is to be limited as much as possible and to stay out of your lives as much as possible. As Leanne mentioned, certainly the recorder's office is responsible for keeping track of records, and they do a great job of keeping track of those records and making sure that they are stored in safe places. The surveyor's office is also responsible for things regarding your property. Section corners and section corner perpetuation is something that is very important to property rights, especially in a state like Utah that uses the public land survey system. I think those are two very important roles. In fact, the most important roles if you look at why they're codified offices as far as the recorder and surveyors goes. But beyond that, I think it is very important that those offices stay as limited as possible. I think when it comes to taxation, I personally believe that fees are another form of taxation. And so that if we can minimize fees to the public beyond minimizing property taxes, that is a benefit that the recorder surveyor's office could bring to the public. I also think those records need to be as available as possible. I think that especially in a situation like this where those records are made available to the public a little bit easier online, I think that they should have been available in any situation. So those are some things that I would like to bring to the government. But first and foremost, I think that the recorder's surveyor's office needs to stay as limited as possible and stick to those initial codified duties and stay out of our lives as much as possible.
Okay, I think you pushed that right up to the 90 seconds. Like, well done.
You did recommend setting a timer with your phone, so I did have my phone on timer.
Okay, that was the best timed one we've had yet, James. So, the follow-up question to that, and maybe we should have clarified a little bit before that first question. What is the proper role of government? The follow-up question is generally, what is the role of a county surveyor, recorder surveyor, right? What is that role? How is it different? Both of you partially answered that with the first question. So I think what we're going to move on to is really why you want to be the recorder surveyor. What is your driving motivation there? With that, we'll go ahead and start with James again.
So I think some of my motivation for running for county surveyor recorder stems from the motivation when I wanted to get involved initially with the tax increases. I want to limit government. I want to lower the impact that the Weber County government has on our residents' lives. I think some of that impact comes in the form of property taxes. I also think that some of that impact comes in the form of fees when it goes to recording a document, when it goes to getting an online subscription to be able to research and pull documents. Those are all ways that the recorder surveyors office can impact our lives. I think we need to minimize those fees. I think that we need to bring some private sector ingenuity into the office to bring some efficiencies in there and to lower those costs, to lower those fees. I also think that we need to look at ways where we can lower or make things more available to residents on a daily basis, so that if someone wants to do research on their property, that they can pull their entire chain of title back to patent from the federal government or from the Utah state. That it should be an easy form or an easy way for our residents to go in and pull that data. So my motivation stems from two things: is really my passion as a surveyor, as a second generation surveyor, and also limiting the government, limiting the fees and expenses within all forms of county government.
Thank you. Leanne.
Well, as you can see, I'm compassionate about my records and about what goes on in our office. And just to make a few clarifications, you can go online on the surveyor site and see any and all the surveys that have been filed for free. And on the recorder side, you can look at all the dedication plats and subdivisions that are online also for free. You can come into the office, you can search any and all of our records for free. If you print them yourself, they're 50 cents. So that just is some of the costs for maintenance and things like that. But I'm passionate about those records and the maps that fall back into the like I said, one of my oldest maps is 1870, and right now we're in a preservation process, and we've got 35. When I took over, some of the books and bindings were falling apart, and we didn't want those books to go by the wayside, so we are working on that. My love of the cursive writing, being able to read those old abstracts and what went on with the county. I have the knowledge, I have the expertise. And you know what I've learned from working with the surveyors is we can train and teach each other, and we can learn from one another. And that's what I brought to the table, is working together with the surveyors and learning from each other.
Our follow-up question here relates to really a question that a lot of people, I think, have in general, in the general public. They really sometimes don't understand what the recorder surveyor does. You guys have done a good job of talking about, the record keeping and that kind of stuff. But I think the question that we'd most like to ask right now is, how does that role affect Weber County citizens? So, Leanne, when you talked about, the monuments, the 2,000 monuments that your office has found, what does that mean to the average citizen? Why should they care about that? How does it affect? So we'll go ahead and start with you, Leanne, and then we'll move to James.
Great question. Everyone who owns property in Weber County has a description. And so let's start from the beginning. You buy a piece of ground, you go to the title company, they're gonna get you a deed, a warranty deed, quitclaim deed, if you borrow money on it, and all these things need to be recorded. So that's the recording side of it, is keeping track of all that information. There's military documents, there's such a vast variety of documents, but let's just stay with the basics. Okay, I own a piece of ground. Now, in order to deed that from one entity to another, you have to be able to describe the ground. If it's in a subdivision, then it has you have a lot and a block usually of a subdivision. But you also have to be able, on that subdivision, to tie it to a monument to tell me how many feet, whether we're going to go north, south, east, west, we're going to go this many feet, and on a bearing and on a distance. And that's what we plat out to make sure your record owner and what's out on the ground. That's why surveyors are so important, because they're out on the ground. They're the hands on they're out there looking for that. And that's why our monuments are so important, because fence lines are important, our interpretation of what is out there, records versus measures. So there's a lot to it. Any property owner, and we're just protecting your property rights and trying to get the acreage right so the assessors can do it. The recorder's office is a backbone to that taxing entity that we have. So that's why the recorder's office is so important. And you're right, a lot of people don't know what.
Okay, James, why should Weber County citizens care about what the recorder surveyor office does?
Well, as Leanne mentioned, it's very important to property owners and property rights. It does start with the documents. So they have documents that go all the way back to patent. So for those that don't know what a patent is, it's when the government gives someone land. So Initially, the United States, all the land was owned by the United States unless it was patented or deeded before the United States became a country. But in Utah, that's not the case. It's either deeded by the United States or deeded by the state of Utah if it was after statehood. And so that there's a chain of title that has deeds going from patent all the way forward. And that is very important because there's things like junior and senior rights. And when it comes to monument preservation, so the recorder's office is responsible for preservation of documents. The surveyor's office is responsible for preservation of monuments. So most of those monuments are public land survey system section corners. So shortly after the time of George Washington, they decided that they'd lay out this mile-by-mile grid of monuments all across the nation. And surveyors are the ones who laid those monuments out. Surveyors are the ones who've been specifically trained to retrace those monuments. And even though those monuments are supposed to be set in a mile-by-mile grid, they're not exactly a mile. And so surveyors have the special expertise and training to know exactly where those monuments are supposed to go back. And every person's deed, every person's legal description in the state of Utah goes back to those unless you happen to be in a platted city, and then they'd go back to the city monuments.
Great. Thank you both. The next question relates to your past experience. What have you done for the past, 5 years? This is a common question. And what do you plan to accomplish in the next 4 years, if elected? This is a 4-year term. So it'll be a 2-part question. We'll go ahead and let you answer the first one, and we'll come back to you for the second. Go ahead and start with Leanne. What have you accomplished over the past 5 years that you want us to know?
Oh, like in my first address, we have done so much, and the things I'm proud of on the recorder side is the preservation and restoration that we've got going, and we still have a lot of books to refurbish and look at and get that going. And on the surveyor sides, it's the monument preservation. When we found those, we've gone out, we've found them, whether they're there, whether they're not. All the work now has to go forward on the ones that have to be restored. We've got a restoration process going on right now. I think we've got 60 of those that we need to restore. So looking forward, we've got a lot of exciting things that we're working with, and mainly working together. That's my main thing is we can accomplish so much when we ping each other for ideas and what's going to work and what's going to work best for Weber County. So that's what we're proud of.
James, what have you accomplished over the past 5 years?
Well, in the past 5 years, I've been, I guess, quite a few things. I have been the vice chair of the Weber County Republican Party. I've also served as chair of the Utah Council of Land Surveyors. I also maintain my position as a private land surveyor managing a firm that surveys all over the country doing power lines. So we are responsible for retracing and reestablishing a lot of section corners, as well as monumenting or just locating those section corners as we build power lines across the country. Some of the things I'm most proud of in that time are that I have been responsible. Most of my work is fixed fee work. And so as a survey manager, I'm responsible for making sure that we are on budget or under budget, and we are on schedule or under schedule. And there's a lot of efficiencies that we've had to gain as we move across from state to state or across the state of Utah. There's many different terrains across the state of Utah. So understanding how to create a budget, understanding how to stay within that budget have been very important. I also, with my political involvement, when I ran for commissioner 2 years ago, I got one of the commissioners to sign a pledge that they would roll back taxes, and then the other elected commissioner committed in one of our Meet the Candidates to rolling back the taxes as well. So beyond my involvement as a private land surveyor, just my political involvement, I feel like I've done a little bit of movement and just would like to continue to do movement to try to lessen the burden of taxes and fees on Weber County residents.
And the follow-up question here is what you'd like to accomplish over the next term if you are elected this year. So James, we'll go ahead and start with you this time. What would you like to accomplish?
I think one of the most important things I'd like to accomplish is making those recorded documents more available to the public. I think they all need to be available to the public as quickly and easily as possible. I would also like the surveys that are available to the public to be linked to people's property rather than individuals having to go search on a GIS map. I do think Weber County's maps are incredible, and Leanne is absolutely correct. They're so much better than they were, but I do think that there's continued improvement that can be made. I think that there's some private sector, as I said before, and the delegates are probably sick of hearing me say efficiency and ingenuity. But those are the words that often pop in my head when comparing the government to the private sector. And I'd like to bring some of that efficiency and ingenuity. There it is again. Everyone's probably turning off their computers right now. I'm not going to listen to the rest of the Meet the Candidates tonight. But I think that I would like to bring that efficiency in and see if we can lower some of those fees. I think that the county office, trying to generate revenue, I think is great. But personally, well, I don't actually think that they should be necessarily generating revenue. I think we should be trying to keep Weber County residents' money in their pockets as much as possible. And obviously things cost money, copies cost money, machines cost money, all of these things cost money. But I think that if you run it more like a private sector company, that there are ways to make the impact a little bit less on Weber County residents. And that's what I'd like to accomplish in the next 5 years.
Thank you, James. Leanne, what would you like to do?
Seems how we've got this question about the fees and that going on. So I'd like to touch base a little bit what we've done. Seems how I am the president of the Utah Recorders Association. The fees are set by the state. That was HB 247 that came into effect last July. And so it's a flat fee. We've worked the last 4 or 5 years with the National Association of Property Rights Division. There was kind of, our recording fee was all over the place and they wanted a standard flat fee. And so it took us a good 4 or 5 years working that through. So the fee schedule that we have for recording fees is actually set by the state and the House bills. So that's where that comes from. As far as our recording stuff, hey, it's $50 a month to get the abstract in that. We feel, along with other counties that charge for that, our price is really, within the ballpark there of other offices. But if you do come into our office, it's free. So you are just more than welcome anytime to come in and get our information from us and get those documents. Like I said, dedication plats, that's usually what people need the most, are out there online for free. And so are our surveys. So that's where we're at with recording.
One of the ways, thank you, Leanne, one of the ways that, we've had to adjust as a county party this last little while is moving all of our meetings online, right? We have a lot of phone calls, a lot of video calls, that kind of thing. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's forced us to, adapt. And at the end of this process, I really do think that we're going to be a more efficient organization. I think a lot of organizations are discovering the same thing. The next question relates to that in that, traditionally it's difficult to connect sometimes with elected officials. How do you envision connecting with your constituents to make sure that you're understanding their needs, that we're serving them well? How do you envision connecting with your constituents, Leanne?
Yes, this has been an interesting process. I got to, who would have thought? Not me. I'm used to meeting people and talking one-on-one. I kind of miss that. I miss the feedback that I get from them on the suggestions. I love to listen to people, and I love to take a new idea and see if we can roll with it and so meeting with the delegates, the caucus, I'm a caucus believer. I didn't get signatures. I believe in the system. I believe in meeting face to face. So I'm usually available in the office from 8 to 5. My cell phone. The only thing I'm not really good at is this Zooming. It takes me a little while, but I'm getting better. I'm now to my 3rd or 4th one of these. So technology, yes, it moves forward. It's fast. I'm just thankful that I have people in my office that can help me, and I'm not afraid to ask for help. So.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. And James?
Personally, I would like to make everything that would typically be available in person, and this is with or without the current situation, make it available online. It is very easy to go in the Weber County Recorder Surveyor's office and walk up to the desk and ask somebody a question. I would like to see that same availability online, to have maybe a chat box. If you're on a website searching to buy something, this little thing pops up in the corner and it says, hey, how can I help you? I would like something similar to that. I think that is a way that we could potentially, reduce some of our office overhead as far as that goes, is have things online. I know that's why a lot of businesses offer things online, is so that people aren't calling as much or popping in as much. And certainly we don't want to lose the personal touch. And and remove that ability for people to come in the office, because there are a lot of people that do want to come in the office. But for our new digital generation, we want to make things available digitally, and we want to make questions and answers available digitally. I think that, questions and answers right up on that main Weber County Recorder Surveyor page are a major thing. I think that property disputes are one of those things that people think that the county surveyor's office can take care of, when in reality the county surveyor's office just reviews plats, takes care of surveys, and reestablishes monuments. Any property disputes need to go through a private land surveyor. So I think, and I do know that that information is available if you search through the website, but I'd like things to be just a little bit more user-friendly in this digital age, and I certainly would like individuals, including myself, to be a little bit more digitally accessible.
Thank you both. We have a number of questions. We've had a number of questions come in about taxation. I think a lot of times people wouldn't think of the Recorder Surveyor office as having a direct impact on it. But what we'd like to hear is how you would limit taxation from your role. How could you influence the county to even reduce taxes as the Recorder Surveyor of the county? James, we'll start with you.
Well, I think it goes back to what I was talking about 4 years ago when the county raised tax increases, and I stood up in a public meeting and said that this tax increase was unnecessary, that a 21% tax increase was completely unnecessary. And most of our elected officials at the time all spoke up and said that it was necessary. I still believe that tax increase was entirely unnecessary. Another form of taxation is fees, and I know that some of the fees are set by the state. I know that there are lots of other fees that are not set by the state, and lots of other ways that we can provide information for free that don't include copies and things like that. And so I think that besides reducing the fees and besides making things more available, I think that ways that we can limit taxation is just by setting a more efficient department. Besides returning revenue, I think that overall the budget should be decreased. I think all around and that's one of the reasons that I chose to run for this position. I think that an elected position, a department head in the county, can set the example that says, hey, we can run the government more like the private sector. We can make things more efficient. In the next coming 6 months, we're expecting an economic downturn because of this pandemic. There's going to be a lot of private sector landowner or private sector small business owners who are going to be able to, squeeze water out of a rock or blood out of a turnip. And I think at the county level, we need to be doing the same thing. And had we kept taxes a little bit lower 4 years ago, I think we'd be in a much better position to help our residents.
Thank you, James. And Leanne, how can we reduce taxes on our citizens?
I think one of the ways is communication with the department heads and the commissioners. And when we do our budgets and that, we can discuss ways that we can help them. The nice part about the Recorder Surveyors, now that we're in the black, we're able to help other offices that don't have the ability to be in the black, that they are just a fee or property tax base collected. That's their only source of the general fund. So working with the other commissioners, and we have a great communication right now with the commissioners. We have monthly staff meetings and we go over that and our budget. And even though I appreciate the private side of the budget, we've done a lot of things, our restoration and monument progress. We've made progress in that where we can use those funds to preserve the monuments. But first we had to identify all those monuments. So we've come a long way. We've done a lot of things that I think could help and reduce the, if I'm turning money back into the budget, then we could make a reduction there.
Thank you. One of the things that has changed a little bit in the last few months is we've gone from this really booming economic scenario here in Weber County and across the nation is the sudden awareness we all have of the fragility of some of our local economies, particularly for small businesses. One of the things that we consistently hear from those business owners is that there is too much regulation, and that can take lots of different forms. And on a county level, it looks very different than a state or national, certainly. But what is your belief about what the county could do, and whether that's in your office as the Recorder Surveyor or at the county in general, something you might advocate for? But what do you think the county could do to reduce the regulatory burden for our small businesses? And we'll start with Leanne.
To reduce the small businesses, one of the things that the Recorders is in charge of is the taxation purposes for each business. Not so much business, but property owner in itself. So we're in charge of taxing for water and sewer. There's Central Weber Water, there's Roy Water, there's then you've got your sewer districts, you've got your city limits, and we're not able to tax. We have to make sure that each property has fallen within the correct tax bracket. So there's CDAs and RDAs, and there are so many different taxing entities out there. It would just kind of blow you away. So one of the most important things that we can do is make sure, if they're supposed to be in an RDA and a CDA, make sure that each parcel of land is getting the right assessment, tax assessment for it. And that also comes out of the recorder's office. So we've got a lot of things: Powder Mountain Water and Sewer. We've got your Western Weber has a new park district, cemetery districts. We have so many districts that we're in charge of and keeping track of those, and we're kind of proud on the job that we do, and we keep that straight for small businesses so they're not taxed if they're in an RDA.
Thank you. James, how do we reduce the regulatory burden?
I think overall, the recorder's office and the surveyor's office aren't too involved with the regulation of small businesses. As we both discussed, that the offices are really in charge of keeping track of things, documents, monuments, and things like that. But overall, my personal opinion is that zoning is a major way that the government regulates us. I think people should be free to do with their land as they wish to a certain extent. And I think that zoning is a major way to regulate landowners beyond what the government should be doing, at least a portion of the time, if not a majority of the time. Another form of regulation is just collecting money. I think when any budget that the governmental budget is talked about in the red or the black, I think it's missing a broader spectrum of the fact that that budget is full of taxpayer dollars, and that's all it is taxpayer dollars, whether those are collected via property tax or whether they're collected via fee. So overall, I think being in the black is great. I think there's been an admirable job done, and as far as what was turned over in the budget when it comes from 2015, but it still frustrates me when I hear things like the budget is in the black, because it's still taxpayer dollars and the budget is still increased over time. And I think that we need to do our best to return that budget and reduce regulation, reduce fees, and reduce taxes so that our small business owners are more free to do with their money as they wish.
Thank you guys for your participation tonight. We have a few questions left. One of them that has stood out to me as being a little bit unique is, how do we avoid conflicts of interest in this role? Now, there are a number of forms that could take. Certainly, personal interest in an enterprise versus something you might be working on. But I'd like to take more of a philosophical approach. What is your understanding of what conflict of interest is, and how do you deal with that in such a role going forward? We'll go ahead and start with James.
Well, I think conflict of interest, especially in the position of commissioner, was a big issue. The commissioners are both the legislative and executive branch, and so I think there was, a worry that commissioners had business enterprises within the county within Weber County that might be at conflict with laws and legislation that were passed through the county commissioner. Certainly, the recorder's and surveyor's office has a much less opportunity for conflict of interest. I do think if any recorder surveyor were to, have their own documents recorded or a monument that was in the process of preservation that was in front of one of their yards or a property that was going to be purchased, that would be a conflict of interest. But those opportunities are small, and if they did arise, I would absolutely be recusing myself from that. There are opportunities for surveyors to, do just stuff that's involved with the county where they live in, around their property and around their friends' properties. Those could be conflicts of interest. But again, those are small, and I would completely recuse myself. Certainly the opportunity is not there that exists for the commissioner. But I do think that in any situation where the recording of a document or the establishment of a monument has any sort of interest that affects the county surveyor, that individual needs to recuse themselves immediately.
Thank you, James. Leanne?
We deal with conflict of interest on, usually it's on property owners' rights or boundary lines. And what we like to do is show them the information that we have and kind of gear them towards getting a private land surveyor. A lot of the questions that come in when they have conflicts is they want the county surveyor to fix their problem for them, and they just don't realize that the county surveyor, that's not their job. And so we have to direct them to the private land surveyor. And protecting property rights and dealing with conflicts we do that day in and day out. First you hear from one party and then you hear the next party, and no one's happy, and two brothers fight over 6 inches. And even though that's sad, that's the fact of life. And what we do there is we try to all we can do them is show us what's on record and give them what we have on record, and they have to fix the conflict themselves. We are not the referees, we're not the judge, we're not the jury. There is a way for them to the process to get that complications fixed on their conflict of interest. So
thank you. Our next question relates to something that all elected officials in the state of Utah are required to do, and down from, the governor all the way down to our local peace officers, and that is that we swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Utah, and to execute the duties of our office with fidelity. Now, those are customized for each particular office. Those 3 things are in all of them. But what we want to hear from you tonight, as we try to get to know you just a little bit better, is what is your understanding of what that oath means? Why is it important? And how do you intend to follow through on that promise? Go ahead and start with James.
The Constitution itself is one of the most important documents in the world, certainly for our nation, our state, our county, as well as for me personally. You can see 3 documents behind me in my office here at work, and while my camera angle was staged to include those 3 monuments, it wasn't adjusted much. Those 3 documents have been in my office, hanging on the wall since I first got in office. Became a licensed land surveyor, and I think that they are a guiding documents in what I do every single day. I've already talked about the founding fathers that were land surveyors, and property rights were very important to them. The Constitution lays out very minimalistic roles of government, and if you were to accompany the Federalist Papers along with the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence, you'd get a much broader perspective of how I personally feel about the role of government. And as an elected official, I'd absolutely defend the Constitution. I think the Constitution would lay out the things that are important for a surveyor to do, that we need to keep the roles as minimal as possible and defend those monuments and their location and their appropriate reestablishment, as well as protect the documents that have been established for people to track their property rights. And so, again, I just think it's an absolute imperative document, and I love the fact that our elected officials are sworn to uphold it.
Leanne.
Yes, the oath of office in which I took has a dear meaning to me, and keeping the records and keeping the surveyor's office. There's nothing more important to me. Yes, the founding fathers, and they were surveyors, and they are very important in all of your property rights. But their recorder's office also has a side that there needed to be a person to keep the records so that they could find the records. So my oath of office was not only for the recorder's office and the surveyor's office to protect and preserve, and I feel like that we're doing that right now, preserving those records for the next generation. It's endearing to go down and see those older hand-drawn maps that they took the time and the preciseness of each one. They have little dashes for swamps, and they have each symbol has a different meaning. And when you start to look at the heritage and where we came from and how far we've come, it's endearing to each one of us. And I want to protect and do follow through on my oath that I took, that I will protect and preserve everyone's property rights to this day and forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. As we come to a close on our virtual Meet the Candidate tonight, we'd like to give you both a chance to share with us, your final thoughts. Like, what are the things, or maybe it's a question we haven't asked or something that you want to leave us with, but what haven't we shared with you that you guys both think that that we need to hear, that our delegates would, like to hear on the way out. So we'll go ahead and start with our incumbent this time, with Leanne. Leanne, we'll give you 3 minutes on this one again if you'd like, just like we did at the beginning. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, delegates. It has been an honor and a privilege to be your county recorder for the last 6 years. I have learned so much, and I have come to even love Weber County more than even possible. I thought I'd just highlight for you some of the highlights of my 6 years. When we went down and volunteered for the train station, how important that was, and the people that we got to meet there. And Weber County is about people. It's getting your hands dirty. It's getting to be in the middle of things. I enjoyed when we went to Roy Elementary, and I look forward to that, to teach the fourth graders about county government and the things that go on in each department, and just to work with the kids and to teach them and tell them the importance of voting. They really don't realize how important voting is. And the flag that you have here of Coldwater Canyon that was flown in North Ogden, how important that was, and the great majesty it was to see that flying. And Weber County just means so much. The eastern part of Weber County, there isn't anything more spectacular than that. And to be able to be the record keeper and to keep track of that stuff, and for next generations, it's just endearing to me. And the things that I've learned from the surveyors, from the private sector that they've taught me, I have 3 of the most wonderful licensed surveyors, and they've taught us and we've taught them where to find the things and work together. And that's what I'm mostly proud of, is the people and the employees that I work with day in and day out, and those other department and elected officials. Right now, Weber County is doing the best job. Right now, the communication is great. This pandemic, we're all working together so that we can keep our employees safe and keep the people that are coming in. And on a national note, it's just become aware to the national property rights, and that how important the recorder's office is, because they're wanting us not to shut down, because then that shuts down real estate. And it is important. It's important for the recorders to keep going through this time, to keep recording so that we don't lose anyone's property rights, no closings, no loss of interest rates on your trust deeds. I'm endeared to Weber County. I love Weber County, and there's nothing more important than a recorder surveyor's office to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. And James, reminder, you have 3 minutes on this one.
I appreciate it. I certainly appreciate, again, Weber County Republican Party putting this together. And again, I appreciate the delegates' time. Sorry if I bored you. I'm sorry if I got repetitive with some of my words. I think the main thing that I'd like to emphasize, and it's been said and heard, said by me and heard by the delegates many times, is just a different perspective I bring. 4 years ago, I stood up in a couple of county meetings and absolutely vehemently opposed the tax increase. Almost all of our elected officials spoke up on behalf of that tax increase, and very few residents spoke up on behalf of that tax increase, and it was passed anyway. And then again, 2 years ago, I ran on that platform, and it was clear to me at that time that the delegates did not want a commissioner who had passed the tax increase. And I truly believe that our delegates, that our Weber County residents want to see more fiscal prudence with their tax dollars, more fiscal prudence with their fees for any office that are paid towards the county. And that's the different perspective that I bring, is truly understanding and feeling that these are the taxpayer dollars. Every hour that is worked at the county by our wonderful county employees, every hour that is worked, every vehicle that is driven, every gas mile that is used is taxpayer money. As the second generation surveyor, my father had a very small business. In fact, I would say that I actually hand drafted some of the survey plats where I grew up. Not that AutoCAD hadn't been invented yet then, just my father couldn't quite afford AutoCAD at the time that I started working for him. But coming from that small business of just a handful of employees to working with a company of over 600 employees now, I really truly understand how important it is to keep our tax dollars in the residents' pockets, our tax dollars in the business owners' pockets, and make an economy in Weber County that is it is conducive to growing small business. And the best way to do that, beyond our hardworking residents, beyond the hardworking employees of any company, is to limit the taxation burden, to limit the fee burden that is on our residents and our businesses. And I believe that's the perspective that I can bring to the Recorder Surveyor's office. Besides the passion for surveying that I bring over many years, and as I said, multiple generations of surveying that I bring to the table, it's that private sector perspective, and that perspective of knowing that it's actually our delegates, our Weber County residents, it's our Weber County business owners' money, and we need to be very fiscally prudent with that.
Thank you, James. We appreciate you both jumping on again tonight. We do have one final surprise for you that we haven't talked to you about. And this is in light of the situation that we're facing right now, we'd like to help out some of our local businesses in the area. And so what we'd like to hear from both of you is, what is your favorite Weber County restaurant? What is your favorite meal or item at that restaurant? And the very first delegate that emails webercountygop@gmail.com with the correct answers to this question. In other words, they listened all the way to the end.
They listened to the end.
They listened all the way to the end. I, Ryan Wilcox, will personally give them a gift card for $20 to that restaurant. With that, James, what is your favorite Weber County restaurant?
Well, I can't not say Burger Bar because I'm from Roy, right? So Burger Bar, and it really is Burger Bar. I just brought up Burger Bar before with some individuals, and some people thought it was gross, which I can't imagine that you thought Burger Bar was gross. It's a greasy spoon. It's supposed to be greasy. So Burger Bar with their fries and fry sauce. My kids will suck down cups of fry sauce with no fries attached. Love that place. In addition to that, one of my neighbors, his sister was Miss Weber County, represented Weber County at the Miss Utah pageant, and she had a Burger Bar outfit that her mom sewed for her. So if I didn't say Burger Bar, I'd certainly be in trouble. But it is an excellent place. Love their fries, love their hamburgers.
All right. I should clarify, I'm not buying you a gift certificate to both restaurants, just so you know, just whichever one of the two that you pick. All right. Leanne, what's your favorite Weber County restaurant?
Hey, I have to say Javier's. I love Mexican food, so that's my pick.
And
There's not much in it. I've been to Burger Bar, and I love their gems and their tater tots and that. And I'm actually from Plain City, but there's not a whole lot of eating establishments here. So let's go with Javier's.
What's your favorite dish at Javier's?
Ooh, the chips and salsa.
Chips and sauce. That's easy.
I will agree. Javier does have.
Both of you, I just want to point out, both of you picked, items that are generally the appendage to the main meal, the fries and the chips and salsa, which is interesting. I don't know what that means.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't pick fries. I went with fry sauce. That's even.
All right.
Oh, yeah, better.
Well, both of those are classic, very unique Weber County establishments that we are very glad exist in our community. And, it is an extremely difficult situation, and we appreciate all of those watching and listening, supporting our local economies and certainly our restaurants. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. Weber County Republican Party. This has been our simulcast of our virtual Meet the Candidate night. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to the campaigns directly, to the candidates directly between now and we have our virtual convention coming up here on April 18th. So we have just a week and a half, a little bit of time here to get that done. James, if you'd like to leave your contact information for everyone, share that, and we'll leave from there.
So you can reach me via email at coates4weber@gmail.com. That's COUTS4Weber@gmail.com, or call or text on my cell phone, 801-589-3902.
And Leanne?
Leanne Kiltz at Gmail. And then my cell phone number is 801-644-0938.
Hey, thanks once again, and you guys have a great night. Best of luck in the race.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Thank you
thank you
guys
guys for everything.